right. Welcome to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Catagay Sen from the ReallyTrusted team. He's our FINTRAC Express program lead, and Taylor Cameron, who's our manager of business development. And the topic I wanted to bat around today is something that we actually are uniquely positioned to talk about. And that's specifically how things are going in the mortgage sector in the first 3-ish weeks now, depending on when you're listening to this, of their quote coverage under the FINTRAC regs. So let me kind of give our audience a bit of framing here.
Yeah.
Taylor spends most of her day, most weeks, chatting with potential clients, people who have realized that they need to know more about FINTRAC. They reporting entities across both the real estate and the mortgage sectors primarily, and develops some interesting insights around their beliefs at that stage. Catagay spends most of his life chatting with brokerages who have chosen to hire us and gets really granular on their FINTRAC compliance policies. And so what I was hoping to bring to our audience today is the insights that Taylor and Catagay have brought or have gleaned through the last 3, well, actually, we launched this kind of mostly about a month ago now. Today's date is November 1st, but we launched this roughly the beginning of October, where we really started talking with a lot of brokerages specific around their policies. So with all of that long intro, let's get into it. Taylor, let's start with you. Can you give me 3, 4, maybe 5 things that you've observed as the feedback that mortgage brokerages, the designated individuals, principal brokers, depending on how you want to call them, what they're seeing as the challenges in their FINTRAC compliance programs?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't even know if we can say that they're seeing it, or rather what I'm seeing, because I think we've got 2 populations. I think we've got the population that doesn't know what they don't know, and then as we're moving through this, we have the population that knows there's a lot they don't know. So I feel like some of the bigger things I think that I'm seeing, just as a whole, is that we have a lot of individual brokers going in and finding their own IDV software that works for them individually, and they're not referencing back to our DIs and our principal brokers to find out what is actually indicated as what we're using in our policy and procedure manuals. So that's a big piece. I feel like we've got a lot of designated individuals waiting for templates to come from associations. And I mean, we can certainly dive into that topic a little more.
Yeah, I think that's worth coming back to for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What is some other things here? And I think the other common thread is that we are hearing, I'm a small brokerage, all of my clients are repeat, they're all low risk, I've dealt with them for years. Or that I'm so small that, you know what, I don't really need to do this, is another unique and interesting perspective in the industry. So, I mean, those are some of the things that come top of mind.
Okay. So the overarching things I think are generally a lack of perhaps frontline staff seeing IDV as being the entirety or the bulk of their obligations, and whether that's true or not is a conversation we'll have in a second, but really being focused on that IDV part. DIs thinking that maybe templates are going to solve this for them. And then going back to the frontline staff, well, actually, this is kind of where frontline staff and DIs need to get on the same page is what is a low risk individual and what is risk and how is risk identified? Okay, cool.
And it's not a checkbox determination.
Right, yeah. And we've talked a bit about that in previous episodes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, and we'll come back to that. I want to open up the conversation to Catagay, see what he's seeing on the other side. People who have chosen to engage with us for either of the 2 reasons Taylor's identified. Maybe they know they have a problem, they need some help, or they don't know they have a problem, but they need some help. What are you seeing, Catagay, in those meetings when you're doing that consult, when you're creating the policy manuals? Where are you finding the real challenges that DIs and brokerages are facing?
Right. Yes. So I've had several meetings now, and one of the issues that I've seen pop up regularly is that these guys up until now have been used to having the lenders do all the pretty much burdensome work of ID verification, etc., ensuring that the proper controls were in place to properly identify the clients, things like that. And they never touched based on any client funds either. They say they do not do that. So one of the issues now that with the FINTRAC application coming to play as of October 11 is that they are a bit nervous as to how they're going to go through this process because they are the front line now to do this. I mean, the assurance that I try to give them naturally is that we as ReallyTrusted are here to assist them along the way from our systems that are going to be in place for the ID verification, etc. And that's where Taylor, I agree with you. Some have already started to, in the past, utilize some IDV third-party applications, but I always insist them that because the question pops up sometimes that they also asked whether they need another application for this purpose. I said, no, you don't, because when you sign up for our program, you're getting full coverage as to the systematic capabilities of the app, etc. So all the ID verification, remote ID verification applications are going to be in place, and hence you're going to be covered in respect of your sanction list controls, PEP list controls, etc. We're going to ensure that your database is going to be covered. Respect your high risk of monitoring obligations, your adverse media controls, which will come into play, which really gives them a good insight into what we can do for them, etc. And the training aspect is very exciting for them. I see, especially they want to have this as soon as possible training because they want to create that shift in mindset for their underwriters, their associates, etc., who are going to be dealing with the client information, the files, etc. They want to understand what those indicators are going to be. How to risk rate clients, especially this is something that I also underline many times, that it's okay to risk rate your clients as high risk clients, because if you don't in the future and you have a possible FINTRAC examination coming through and they identify something where they're going to feel that should have been rated as a high risk client, then you're going to be in trouble. So I'm reiterating throughout these meetings that risk rating your clients as high risk is okay and it's important for you. And I also give them the example that there's some perception that if you risk rate a high risk client, then somehow regulatory authorities are going to know about this, etc., and they're going to flag their clients and maybe carry out further audits and things like that. That is not the case. It's internal assessment, but it is to ensure that you have the proper controls in place to keep that business relationship under taps throughout that time.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So if I can unpack what I've just heard you say that I think was really interesting is kind of two pieces there. One, a lot of these mortgage entities were already aware of some of the anti-money laundering stuff because of their upstream relationships, and had been relying on those upstream relationships. Well, relying is too strong a word, actually. Just knew they could ignore that part of the world because of those upstream relationships, and they were right. But the result of that, and this is where I'm particularly interested to hear this, is they realize they have these obligations. They're taking them very seriously. Their excitement around training is amazing and awesome and so wonderful to see. It's very refreshing, in fact. But they're not necessarily understanding all of the specific part around this risk rating clients, and that's something Taylor touched on as well. This challenge that frontline staff in particular have around appropriately risk rating clients, and realizing that that's not a bad thing, and realizing that that's actually what you want, and realizing that just because you know them doesn't mean they're low risk. Which is something we've been struggling with as a company with our real estate brokerages for years. In fact, it's not an uncommon conversation to be having. In fact, I had this conversation at the beginning of this week when I was presenting one of our brokerage partners, where that's exactly what the agent said, and I had to walk them through how the flaws in their thinking on that. So, no, that's interesting, and really kind of appreciate the feedback on that. So, let's pick through. Let's start at the beginning. There's kind of 4 or 5 areas there that I've heard everybody kind of talk about. So let's talk about this IDV thing. Taylor, you brought this up as something that we're seeing kind of a fragmented use of IDV solutions is perhaps the language there.
I think, yeah.
And Chata, you brought this up as, what other programs are people going to have to use? So what's the, I mean, obviously I know the answer to this, but I don't want to just babble on. Chata, what is your view? You're the FINTRAC program expert. You're the one doing the consults. Is it okay to be using various IDV solutions? Is that what we want to encourage? Do we want to discourage that? What would your view be on that?
Well, I mean, as ReallyTrusted, we're providing a turnkey solution in respect to the establishment of a compliance program, and which is not necessarily just preparing the documentation and place them in a folder and handing it over to the client. We're ensuring that with the systematic tools in place as well, hence the IDV solution which we're providing. We're giving a complete program, and where they're able to utilize the app with the convenience of having available on their phones, etc., and ensuring that they trust us in properly carrying out those controls in the background through our systematic databases, and also the added comfort of carrying out the sanctionless control, pitless controls, which you have in place as well, etc. So I definitely underline the message when I receive a question like this: is you don't need any other solution. You might have done so in the past for any other purpose, just to have it completed on your mortgage loan records, perhaps. I don't know. That would have been your own choice at that time. But as you're signing with ReallyTrusted and you're signing for the FINTRAC Express program, you have to be trusting us and ensuring that we do the proper thing for you guys, which is the documentation, the training modules, the whole IRT app solution which we provide, and plus, on the other hand, for your high-risk clients, the adverse media controls and monitoring tools that we provide for you in a monthly basis, etc. Plus, I also underline the fact that, for example, in a possible future FINTRAC examination, if and when they receive such requests for information in the form of an e-car, a podcast, the subject we covered in the past.
Yeah,
we are always here to assist them as well, so that they are assured that they're properly responding to those questions, so that FINTRAC doesn't necessarily need to go into any further detail, or might actually leave it at that point.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and I think I'm going to bring Taylor into this in a second, but what I'm hearing you say is that the importance of having IDV is actually just a small part of that frontline staff, and the real kind of key about what we're offering is, in fact, the integration of all of the thinking into one platform in a meaningful way. Taylor, is that ringing true to the people you're talking with? Is that what you're hearing? What are the benefits that you're seeing that maybe Chatai hasn't touched on, and or what are the drawbacks to that approach, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about the drawbacks too. So I agree with everything that Chata has said. But one of the drawbacks in using multiple streams of an IDV is that how are you then providing consistency in the way that we are doing risk determination? So if we're using two different programs, they might be, the value systems might be different or off. So trying to get a continuity across those systems and then being able to document it, I think you're going to run into a big challenge when it comes to an audit and the questions that are going to be asked of you, and how these two different groups, if there's two different softwares, how these two different groups are aligned in doing those risk determinations. So I'd say that's a challenge. And again, I just think it comes back to education. I don't think that we are fully grasping yet in the mortgage industry what FINTRAC is really about, and that there has to be a continuity across all of your pillars, that whatever you have done in terms of risk determinations is how and tied into sorry, I can see you want to jump in.
Well, I just want to jump in because you mentioned pillars, and some of our audience may or may not be familiar with the concept. So let's just unpack that for a second, if you would. Just walk people through what we call the 5 pillars.
Yeah. So, the 5 pillars and what a program should entail as a documented compliance officer, kind of easy, but there are some specific traits and skills that you're going to want to see in the person that you put forward as that, because there has to be enough AML knowledge to be able to properly roll that out, and a few other things. And we've got a great training program on that and webinar that you can join. And don't know when the next date is, Greg, but I'm sure we'll roll that out again. You need to have a documented policy and procedure segment, documenting everything that you say you're going to do, and then procedures allocated to each of those 2 areas. So we have 2 in our program. We have 2 procedure manuals. One is going to be for our front-facing licensees, Front facing, I mean client facing licensees, and then one we have on the back end, which supports all of our compliance or admin staff on the back end, anyone touching administrative documentation for FINTRAC. The other pillar then becomes training. And then we have the effectiveness review, which comes around every 2 years. I think I've hit that right. We've got the compliance officer, your documented policies, training, effectiveness review, and risk. No.
There you go. Yeah,
risk
business risk assessment. That's the one you were missing. Well, and it's funny because what you've just walked people through, in fact, is crucial to a business's ability to have a complete compliance program, right? And what you've just walked people through, whether, and it's subtle, but so let me kind of delve into this. It exactly touches on this next two things that you had identified in the opening to this, which was templates don't really work and or create a bunch of additional challenges. And the other thing you had talked about was this idea of risk rating your clients and the importance of risk rating your clients. And so what you've just highlighted for me is both of those things, because on the one hand, it's basically impossible for you to have a consistent risk rating process if you're using several different methods of creating information records, client information records. And now I should put a bit of an asterisk in there. Our view of client information records are that IDV are a small part or are a part of that in client information record. And it's important to do your ID verification properly, no question. But we've bundled it into the rest of the client information record because that's generally how people are engaging with their clients. And the beauty of that is, if I can go back to the other thing you've said, which is the templates and the importance of weaving it all together, is that when we weave that together operationally, we can then have a very clear answer to what is a low-risk client, and you just can't do that if you're picking somebody else's manual up and using it as your own. It just doesn't work. And I think that's the crux of one of the things that I've heard like both of you say, that is and we spend a lot of time talking about this as a business with a lot of different people, is the specificity of your compliance program for your business is really, really important.
And Greg, to add to that point, I am very happy that we have a lot of buy-in from these mortgage brokers and companies, etc., in respect of the development of their compliance program. Of course, the first step being that when I attain the appropriate information regarding their business and further insight into their risk, etc., I am responsible for the establishment of the documentation. And when I share the draft manuals, it's not just merely, oh, thank you, let's move on kind of thing. They want to ensure that it properly reflects the ongoing business model that they have. Ensure that that all the information which is in the documentation is properly and easily understood by the staff who are going to be able to revert to that when the time comes, etc. So I'm very happy that these guys are putting a lot of buy-in into the development of these documentation, just not merely accepting them because it's a requirement of the FINTRAC obligations kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's one of the things my first bit of feedback to you was that you're absolutely right. Like it's been really nice to see how, and I think it comes from being in a business where there was already a culture of compliance. Compliance as a concept isn't new to the mortgage sector. There's lots of checkboxes and signed forms and things that need to happen for you to be able to process a mortgage deal. And I think that is more true for mortgage entities than it historically has been necessarily for the real estate sector. And we could talk about that, and that's a whole host of problems on the real estate side of things. So kind of outside of the scope of today's conversation. But certainly, and I think what you've just highlighted for me is exactly that like, these are businesses that really do want to have a good compliance posture on this stuff. They really don't want to be helping criminals launder money for like, if we can go back to the brass tacks of what this is all about. They take that obligation seriously, I think, is what I'm hearing you say. Is that reflected in the conversations you're having as well, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to one of the comments I made earlier, that we have this population that don't really know what they don't know yet, and then we have the ones that know that there are things that they don't know, and it's the ones that don't know what they don't know that I have the most fear for. Not completely understanding what it is that we're trying to do, not having enough knowledge to be able to understand the complexities of it, and putting a full and complete program together. And then I think once we give them a little education, they go, oh crap, there's a lot more to this than we actually initially realized. And I think that's the place that's what we should be aiming for right now, is to be able to educate this market, or sort of this industry, to really allow them to understand what it is that we're doing here and the way that we need to be doing it, as well as the whys. Like, I mean, I had a consult just the other day who said, I only do repeat business, been doing this a long time. Further along into the conversation, we were talking about, I had shared, I've been a realtor for 16 years, and shared how once I've been with ReallyTrusted almost a year now, but coming out of the training that we provided, I look back on my career and was like, holy crap, there's at least a half dozen individuals or clients that should have been marked as something more than a low risk, and including a suspicious transaction. And he's like, you know what? Now that you say that, I did have this one incident where it was a part of a drug cartel, somebody was knocked off, and the remaining partners in this business setup came to me, and I'm like, did you do anything with that information? He's like, no, I was scared. And but the point is that this conversation started with, I know all of my clients, we are all low risk, going to, they had somebody that was knocked off. I'm like, okay, need I say more? So
I would suggest to you that there would have been a slightly higher level of risk in this transaction, and you became aware of it at some point in time, whether that was before or after the deal is somewhat irrelevant. You still had some sort of ongoing obligation here. So
yeah, so I mean, it's been interesting, and I think if I can just touch on this, because I have such passion about this, is that we have to remember this is called money laundering for a reason. This is the people that we are dealing with. This has gone through several channels. We're not dealing with the head of a cartel. It's gone through several channels before we are front facing with whoever it is that individual is. They're there to put down our defenses. They're there to be likable and really not want us to dive in and want us to believe the best in them. That's the whole purpose. So we can't go blindly into this and just say, oh, really like them, nothing's, we need to do the due diligence. We need to do that little extra bit of questioning and looking into this to make sure that we're not offside on what they are trying to accomplish.
Now, you've just said we need to do this, and I completely agree with you. But some portion of the audience always says, right, but that's not my job. I'm not a police officer. How do each of you, I have one response that I hope that somebody would say, but what would your answers be to that? Maybe Catagay, do you want to take a crack at that and give us your thoughts on that?
Well, this is, indeed something that has come across, perhaps mostly in the real estate consult meetings I had naturally, but I like to give this time as well. Just basically saying that you may feel that you're doing the work of the regulatory authorities, etc. But I always tell them that, you are providing basically valuable intelligence information, which may be only one piece of the puzzle, but when you fulfill your obligation, especially in regards to something unusual, suspicious, and you're submitting an STR to FINTRAC, that is very valuable information, which may in the end up at the hands of the law enforcement agencies, etc., and they may bring down a whole criminal gang, etc., things like that. So everybody has their proper role in respect of this process. Yes, it may be a burden just doing the additional control here and there, etc. But I mean, it is not something that they have to feel like they're doing it alone, especially with the FINTRAC Express program that they sign up for with ReallyTrusted. We have a whole support desk which is backing up their whole day-to-day activities. They just have to give us a call or send an email, and we are always available to always provide that legislative guidance, elaboration as to what they have to do. So they're not alone. It's something new for them. They don't necessarily feel like they have to do it at first instance. But this is what I said. One day that shift in mindset happens, and that will happen with the day-to-day experiences, the training, awareness, etc. Things will be built up, etc. And they will then feel more comfortable that they have to be doing this, etc. And they want to be doing this. And they will be benefiting the whole system in general in that regard.
Lovely. And I completely buy into that part of things. And I think it's really important to call out that good compliance is actually just good business. I mean, as a business, I don't want to be working with a criminal for all sorts of reasons. Reputational risk, fraud risk increases. The effort, and I guess here's the, like, I think there's like some obvious really good to society parts of things, and you've just kind of really well elaborated on that, in fact. But I think beyond that, just like, let's go really selfish for a second. I'm running a business. It costs me money when I spend a bunch of time working with somebody who ends up being fraudulent, and I therefore don't get paid, or end up getting dragged into a lawsuit, or being investigated by somebody having a production order, having to spend the time to deal with the production order, before I even get to the reputational risk of being the guy who gets published in the newspaper as the one who was involved in the drug trafficking ring and all those things. So there's both, I think, a really good to society part of things that just, well, look, you have an obligation, and so you might as well. But also from a good business point of view, it is insane to me that a reporting entity would willfully choose to not put in place some form of safeguards to protect themselves against all of the elements of fraud that might be perpetrated within their business otherwise. So I think there's kind of both sides of that, to me, are really powerful. I'm looking at the clock. Taylor, you look like you've got something you want to wrap up with. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, it is like Catagay said, it is a piece of a puzzle. So when we have, the banking system doing a report on somebody, and then, the conversations they're having with a bank versus the conversations clients are having with me as a realtor when I'm showing a property, everything is really relaxed, their guard is down, is then a different conversation that they're having with a mortgage broker. And it is a piece of a puzzle. And I think we also have these two thoughts that, when we report something, it goes into a dark void and we never know anything that happens. And then we have the other school of thought that is, oh my God, I'm going to risk somebody as high, or assess them as a high risk. And, they're, CIA is going to come banging on their door and, tear apart their home. And the reality is that we're not always going to know the impact that we have. Greg and you and I have traveled a lot in September, and we sat at tables and rubbed shoulders with a lot of people from FINTRAC, and their ability to disclose a lot of information is also withheld. So similar to if we had witnessed an accident and we take somebody and drop them off at a hospital, we are not privileged to their medical well-being after we drop them off, but we have to know that we had an impact. And so I think I just wanted to end on that note, that we all have a piece of the puzzle to create and build, and we should all take it seriously, and that we are doing something for the betterment of all of us.
That's a really positive way to end this. So thank you for that. I love it. That's terrific. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. Thank you very much, Chat. I really appreciate you both joining me and having this conversation. I do hope that for our listening audience, you'll be able to take away some thoughts as to, if you're a mortgage entity listening to this, I hope you're considering what we've said from your point of view. And if any of what we've said rings true as challenges you might be facing, give us a shout. We're happy to help. That's certainly what we do. If you're looking at this, if you're not a mortgage entity and you've listened this far, well, thank you for joining us. I hope that we've managed to give you some insight into a different sector of the world, and managed to help you understand how other people are grappling with their reporting obligations, as it were. Thank you very much, folks. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. If you'd like more information about our guests, have a story idea, or want to be a guest, please reach out to hello@kycpodcast.com. If you want to discuss your anti-money laundering compliance needs with a member of the Really Trusted team, go to www.reallytrusted.com/consult.